Sonic Generations, which over the last decade or so has always been considered one of the best in the series, has finally made it back to modern platforms. Now, Sega's re-released Sonic Generations as a dual pack with a new game called Shadow Generations. The idea is really similar to what Nintendo did with Super Mario 3D World on the Switch. They re-released it in a special bundle with a new game called Bowser's Fury, which is sort of like what they're doing now with Shadow Generations. I have a lot of thoughts, and I wanted to share them with you guys. So despite the fact that literally everyone on YouTube that talks about Sonic is covering this game very extensively, I thought I would at least put my 2 cents in. I want to kind of talk about how well Sonic Generations holds up today, and I also want to talk a bit about how Shadow Generations feels like a sign of things to come as the series moves forward. This isn't really going to be a review per se, but it is going to be sort of a stream of conscious thoughts and discussion about the 2 games. I'll be bringing up whatever topics come to mind, kind of loosely, so if you're planning to play the games already, the games are good. If you like Sonic games, you're going to like Shadow Generations. I don't really think I need to tell anybody that based on, again, how many reviews there are. If you don't want spoilers, save the video. That's the gist. The game is released in 2 parts, so I figured this will be a 2-part video. The first half is going to go over Sonic Generations and how I feel about its port to the new systems, and the second half will be about Shadow Generations. So let's just get into Sonic and Shadow Generations. Before I start, I do have a little rant I want to get out of the way. I just want to talk about physical copies and the various versions of Sonic Generations. So I like to buy physical copies of games. So the Digital Deluxe upgrade had to be purchased as a separate thing for like $15, whatever, I don't care. That's not the problem. I really don't care about the price here exactly. I just wanted the cool costumes and stuff. They really got me with that Terios skin, or however you say his name. It's like this original concept art for Shadow that they have as a playable skin for the game. And you have to get that from the Digital Deluxe version. It's a cool little throwback to this concept art, and the Dreamcast Sonic is also cool that they did as a pre-order bonus. There's a costume for modern Sonic, there's a costume for Shadow, and I didn't see a costume for classic Sonic. Turns out that classic Sonic costume is a Sonic Jam skin that is only available if you sign up for the email thing. And as of today, the email is completely gone. Like, you can't do that anymore. But I saw on Steam that you can still buy the skin for like $2 or something. I played it on Xbox, and so on Xbox, you can't buy that skin separately. It had to come through that email. As far as I know, it had to come through that email. It's kind of just frustrating to go through these different costumes, and I just kind of want them all. Can I just give you $15 or whatever and just get all these stupid costumes? Because they do make it a little bit more fun to replay the original Sonic Generations as these old skins. They're just kind of neat. They did a good job with them. They're cool, I like them, but they make it so hard to figure out how to get it. I was really late to signing up for that email thing, and I thought that I just wasn't gonna get it. And as of now, like I said, it's gone. All this stuff just makes me feel old, it just makes me feel like, why can't I just buy this stuff? Why can't I just unlock this stuff? I know it's so dumb to say at this point. Obviously I know that the game industry is trying to make as much money as possible. Sega knows that they can do this for people, but it's really it's just lame that they do this stuff. Anyway, ramble over. Let's go play the actual game, okay? Okay, so I'm just gonna assume that you've already played Sonic Generations and that you're going into this sort of video with the idea of what's different, what do you think about it, how does it hold up today? First of all, I just want to give out my sort of personal experience with this game so that you know where I'm coming from. I kind of touched on it before, but when the game first came out, I bought it day one. I watched all those trailers as they came out, and I played the modern Sonic levels to hell and back. I probably went through every level 100 times at least, maybe not Planet Wisp, but most of them over and over, because I just liked trying to get my my time lower. I liked figure out how to get through the game faster, how to do these things. I wasn't speedrunning or anything, don't get me wrong, and I wasn't fighting leaderboards or anything like that, but it was for my own personal enjoyment. I just wanted to feel like I could get through the levels faster, and it was fun to do. So yeah, and for a long time, I considered Sonic Generations as the definitive best Sonic game at the time. At least for a long time, I considered it probably one of the best ones. It would be the only one I would recommend to people. If someone was like, hey, I want to play a Sonic game, I'd be like, probably play Generations. That's probably the easiest one to get into. That's like objectively the best. But nowadays, I've sort of reverted back to preferring the adventure games. I find that over time, the boost formula has gotten a bit stale in the sense that like replaying the levels is a lot more restrictive. It's sort of like in adventure, you have 8 ways to do the same jump, but in Sonic Generations, you have 3 ways to do the same thing, if that makes sense. I have my critiques with Generations these days, and I'm going to get into that, but the game is still one of the better Sonic games, for sure. Like, easily top 5, I would say, like, ever made. I think Generations is one of the few games in the series that I can comfortably run through every once in a while, but still have a good time. Sonic Generations is short, but it also, in being short, is very easy to come back to. So I played it on PC again, I've played it on Xbox, I've played it on PS3, and now I've played it in the new collection. Speaking of Xbox, a while ago, not like recently, Xbox had Sonic Generations available, the 360 version, for Xbox One and Series X. When I got my Series X, I bought the PAL version of Sonic Generations. This is just a 360 copy of the game, but it's really cool because it lets you have a sort of Xbox One version of the game. So I was under the impression that it would probably be a while until Generations gets ported to modern platforms in some sort of thing. I really didn't expect them to do a Shadow Generations. I thought they would be something like Sonic Colors got. I played the 360 version on my Series X with FPS boosts and all that stuff, and I wasn't as hot on it as I remembered. So this is about half a year to a year before they announced Shadow Generations. And there's probably a chance that I've beaten this game to death and I'm kind of just done with it, but I don't really feel that way about Sonic Adventure 2 or Adventure 1 even. It's hard to say because different time, but I just find that there's less expression to Generations gameplay as there is in the adventure games. And I ran into like a lot of bugs even. Like I had an issue in Chemical Plant where I couldn't latch onto the hook thing, which might be due to the FPS boost version. But also I'd just forgotten about some of the really rough parts of Generations, like the really, really lame Planet Wisp levels. Like classic Planet Wisp kind of blows and modern Planet Wisp is slightly better in my opinion, but also isn't that great. And I also forgot about just how rough the controls are, right? Like now I'm sort of so far removed from when Sonic Generations came out that the control style is just super stiff now. And also like the last boss is probably one of the worst in Sonic games. The Time Eater final boss is awful, right? Like I think we can all agree that it's not good. It's like slow and boring and doesn't really make sense. People just bark at you all the time and they're just like, oh, do this thing, change this side, go to this thing, and it's like kind of bad.
It looks like a home shot! Like a homing shot! Like a homing shot! It's like a homing shot!
But that's the thing is, I still very much do love playing those modern Sonic levels. When I was playing back on the PS3, like a decade ago, I would play those games. I knew like all the routes, I knew all the modern Sonic levels front to back, and even did all the classic Sonic things. I did everything in Generations originally when it first came out. So it's not that I'm trying to be like a hater of Sonic Generations or anything. It's a really solid product, but it's starting to show its age for sure. And not really in a way that's making it more fun. Sometimes these Sonic games have gotten really broken up and people have figured out how to do stuff and made it better. And I don't feel like that about Generations. And especially as someone who's like into it, but casually, like I like speedrunning the modern Sonic levels, but without exploits, Yeah, I mean, like, level design is also just kind of thrown for a loop, right? Classic Sonic levels, for example, are not nearly as good as they are in some of the modern sort of things like Sonic Mania. Sonic Mania sort of broke it up in a way that, like, now we've seen how to make really good classic Sonic levels. And so the Sonic Generations portions are all full of weird pits and weird enemy placements and things that block you or send you down a wrong pathway. Classic Sonic Spin Dash, which is really fun to use, is more often than not just a liability, because if you don't know those levels front to back, then you're going to miss a jump and die, which is kind of frustrating and, not the best. I never feel like that in Sonic Mania. In Sonic Mania, it feels like if I feel like I'm supposed to jump somewhere, it's gonna give me something. So let's get into the main differences in the actual new version of the game, Sonic X Shadow Generations. I haven't watched too many videos of people talking about Sonic and Shadow Generations, but I did watch a few about the dialogue changes. Dialogue has been changed in a lot of ways. They added new voice lines for modern Sonic when you save people.
All right, just simmer down, buddy.
I don't really care about them, though. I don't really care about the dialogue changes. I'm not I guess I'm kind of a fence sitter, but I don't really think that they make the game that much worse. Occasionally, the delivery is slightly worse, but I never felt like, wow, if I was playing this game for the first time, this is objectively worse than when I first played the game. Especially with modern Sonic, when you save people, that's just nice to have him talk. It makes sense that he would say something. I know references have been sort of a hot button topic for Sonic fans. I don't really care. I think they're kind of neat. Why wouldn't Sonic talk about the time stones when the Time Eater is there? That makes sense to me, right? He has been familiar with time travel for years at this point. He knows it's real. And so if this thing comes up and it's doing stuff that he's not aware of, he's obviously going to be like, oh, what about that other thing that I know about? That's what people do. So I think it doesn't hurt. It could be a little overbearing at times. I think when you have to say the Green Hill is kind of weird. I don't know if they exactly say it like that, but the Green Hill, the chemical plant is weird because you're on a big planet, and I kind of assume that there's more than one chemical plant. But here's the thing, is I don't really care about the dialogue changes and that sort of thing. I actually really care a lot more about the really bad cover art of all things. This cover art is so boring and confusing. They gotta divvy it up, right? It's gotta be Sonic Generations and Shadow, and they have to have the logo, but what are they standing on and why? They're on little parts of the arc, but they're not connected to anything, and it feels so out of place. They had the original Sonic Generations cover art, they had to add Shadow, and they're I don't know what to do. Maybe it's something to do with corporate Sega forcing them to do things in a certain way, but I do think that another pass on that cover art could have been better for everybody. It does feel just super cheap and corporate to me. It's almost like they had a checklist of things to do. It's okay, well, we already have this art from Sonic Generations. How are we gonna make them work? Let's just put blocks. What if they're just standing on weird blocks that barely fit them? It doesn't make sense. Anyway, that's dumb. Let's move on.
Huh. Couldn't have done it better myself.
So yeah, they also added a Chow scavenger hunt aspect to every level. So every level has 3 Chow that you can look for. This is kind of weird in the sense that it doesn't seem to do anything. I didn't find all the Chow myself, but I Googled it and I couldn't seem to find that it does anything. It doesn't unlock anything. You don't get anything for it. It would have been cool if you had maybe a skin that had a Chow follow you around or something, or maybe an extra skill that gave you Cream and Cheese's ability from Sonic Advance. I know anything like that would have been cool, but no, it doesn't seem like you get anything for doing it. But what is cool is that they're actually acknowledging different types of Chow. For years, they have ignored Swim Chow, Fly Chow, Power Chow. Hero and Dark Chow even don't get that much visibility. So it's really, really cool that they're all different types of Chow. The fact that they have a Chaos Chow, they have a Hero Swim Chow is you would never see that only 5 years ago with Sonic. They would never bring those in. So cool feature. I guess it's a fun bonus. We already had red rings in all the levels. The Chow are really well hidden too. I only found maybe 10 in my whole playthrough. So yeah, cool feature. I like it. Means a lot more for the future of Sonic that they're acknowledging different types of Chow. Who knows? But good sign. I think, though, the worst change they made to Sonic Generations is the drop dash. The drop dash is great. I loved it in Sonic Mania. It fits really well into Sonic's move kit, toolkit, whatever you want to call it. So it's a great add-on for classic Sonic, but modern Sonic's version of the drop dash is completely broken, and I kind of love it. There's got to be loads of speedrunners in the future that I'd love to see just completely take this broken, janky mechanic and run with it. The jumps that you can get are just ridiculous, and it feels like completely out of control. It took me no time at all to find some really silly stuff to do with it, but I can't tell if they're much faster. But either way, I think it's a lot of fun. Like, I did this one part with Perfect Chaos, and it was so good. When you go off of ledges with the drop dash, it's really funny. My only complaint is that classic Sonic can unequip the drop dash, but modern Sonic can't for some reason. In the game, you have the skill shop, and the drop dash equipment item is automatically on by default for classic Sonic. But when you go to modern Sonic, it's not there at all. So it is just part of your moveset. And it can cause some weird sort of irregularities. Like, I have the habit of maybe holding the button a little longer than I should, which leads to holding the drop dash, which leads to using the drop dash, which leads to falling off a cliff. Who knows, man? Maybe I love a little jank in these games, though. Also, it's like really weird to see modern Sonic rolling around in white space, because you just couldn't do that before. Cool for classic, very cool for modern Sonic. That's pretty much all I had to say about the original Sonic Generations. I had a good time revisiting it. It's not been very long for me, but I still do think it is one of the better games. It's not really the magnum opus Sonic game that I once thought it to be, but it really does hold up in a way that I think the average person will really enjoy. Those stiff controls are a big problem, but I think when you get used to it, you kind of get more comfortable with it again. And again, that drop dash just adds so much depth to the character control that I really love to see. I'm definitely going to come back to Sonic Generations at some point. Like, there's no way I don't eventually. And I'll probably stick with the new version, so take it or leave it. That's the Sonic Generations we got now. So on with the main sort of thing here today, Shadow Generations. I had no doubt Generations was going to be good, and 10 years later, I had no doubt Generations was going to be good, and it was. So yeah, Shadow Generations, very good if you're a fan of the older Sonic games, like specifically mid-2000s Sonic games. So let's start with the gameplay. Movement, especially coming after playing Sonic Generations again, feels incredible. It's a lot better, and it's maybe better than Frontiers. I was under the impression that it would at least be somewhat similar to Generations controls, but it's almost identical to Frontiers, including the control style. In Sonic Generations, you can also use the modern control style, and they refer to the old one as Legacy, where like right trigger is boost and stuff. Generations, I played it with the original style. Shadow, I played it with the new style, because it just makes sense.
Oh, hello, Shadow.
So this is probably, in an objective way, the best controlling Sonic game ever, at least in 3D. Everything feels like it's in a good place, all the buttons are very responsive, they don't give you too much lag on anything, like everything works really snappy and quick. I still wish you could take turns a little bit tighter, and I don't really love the modern homing attack where like you can't homing attack things that are off screen. And I do miss the little dash thing that you get back in the day. But there are still a lot more kind of movement abilities. Like you can really press like a lot of buttons really quick, which is really fun to do. Yeah, so in terms of like actual straight controls, it's really well done. And I really liked the snappiness and responsiveness. And it always felt like when I did something wrong, it was probably my fault. And especially because you can boost in any direction in the air, it feels like you have a lot more control. To be critical though, I don't really like the double jump. The way the double jump has worked for a long time, it feels like two halves of a jump instead of one satisfying jump. It's like every time I jump, I have to press it twice, which is just adding unnecessary button inputs. The boosting as well, another nitpick. Why does Shadow have to float when he boosts? Just let him skate. He looks so much cooler skating. Like, let him skate. Dumb stuff. Nitpicks. Nerd.
I need to stay focused. Deal with the problem at hand.
Next up, I want to talk about the upgrades. When those trailers were coming out, the upgrades felt really, really sketchy to me. They were my biggest concern. I'm not so concerned about them anymore, except for one aspect. You get Chaos Spears, or multiple Chaos Spears. You get the transformation into the squid thing that climbs walls, and you get the surfing manta ray thing. Oh, and the kick. You get the kick thing. Those are the 4 main abilities that you get, as well as you get the last one, which I'll talk about separately. The kick maybe doesn't need to be an upgrade though. That could just easily be a type of enemy or a type of object that you interact with. It feels like a hybrid of a enemy and the laser wisp. I really like though that you can aim it. The aiming stuff is really cool. I like how you can experiment with like angles, and quickly snapping to an angle is like really satisfying. Kicking, teleporting, dashing, that's very good stuff. Probably the best ability, also the least intrusive. Chaos Spear. That thing is cool, but very unnecessary. It can be satisfying at times, and it is very responsive, which is good. You never feel like it's making you slow down for something. But it does feel like it's just, when I see A, I press A. There's not much like things to do about it. It's very like, oh, okay, now I'm homing attacking this enemy that needs me to Chaos Spear it first. So I Chaos Spear it, and then I continue. Kind of unnecessary. I mean, it adds a little bit, but it really doesn't do anything. That one you could probably cut. The surfing, I actually liked it a lot more than I thought I would. The surf feels like a really good level gimmick, but that allows you to just do it anywhere. It can control stiff at times, especially in the overworld. It can feel like I'm just hitting stuff, but in the actual levels that utilize it, it's a lot of fun to use. The little spin move that moves you left and right is a cool little addition to the sidestep that we've had for so long. And the general controls are good. I really like that you get a boost if you time it when you land on the ground. That's like just good player expression, like skill expression stuff. It's good, works really well. Good job. Next one, I forgot to mention, Chaos Control. So this mechanic I thought was gonna be very gimmicky, but it turns out it's actually pretty cool. The idea is you just press the left trigger after you build up energy. It's like a separate meter from your boost, and it lets you stop time for 5 seconds. It's never more than 5 seconds, it's never less than 5 seconds. You can't cut it early. You use it and you're trapped in 5 seconds. They do some really cool stuff with it. I like the challenge levels that utilize Chaos Control, and I like how it actually stops the timer, so you can use that to improve your time. Though I do feel like it shouldn't be the real timer. Like, I don't know, it's kind of hard for me to say, because it makes it, for me as someone who likes replaying these levels and to go as fast as possible, it kind of makes it that if I do want to do that, I have to spam Chaos Control. Could go with or without it here. Next one is the squid mode. Squid mode is the first time I was like, what are they doing? When I first saw that in the trailer or whatever, it was like, okay, I don't know about that, but you know what? It's actually fun. It's really fast, which is good. Like, you never feel like you're stuck in this slow squid mode thing that like is completely derivative from the main gameplay, which is good. It definitely feels like it could be a little bit better to control though. Skill issue, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But I didn't like that as much. Oop. And I would say, like, in terms of the skill set, I'd be like, the kick is number 1 because that's just fun to use. Then it would be the surfing, then it would be the squid, then it would be Chaos Spear, and then Chaos Control is kind of like limbo. I don't really have an opinion about it. It doesn't really mean anything, but you gotta do it, right? You gotta have Chaos Control if you're Shadow. But there is one more thing that you get at the end of the game.
I'll overcome every obstacle with this power.
They're all kind of dumb looking. All these Doom abilities are really dumb looking. The level that you do use it mostly, it really is just there to skip stuff. And to me, that kind of defeats the point. Like, why would I want to turn on Chaos Wing and then skip a level? It might be fun for people to see how quickly they can get through levels, because you can, the Chaos Wing, if you enable it, it goes into separate modes where you can use it, which I think is a good idea, because now you have a clear distinction between regular Shadow and Shadow, but you can fly. Shadow Generations, like every modern Sonic game in the last decade or so, has a lot of 2D segments, which I kind of was disappointed by. Every time they show up, I'm a little disappointed by them at this point, because after Frontiers, it felt like they really understood like how to make the 3D levels work really well. And in Shadow Generations, they really make the 3D levels work so well that the 2D levels kind of feel like an afterthought. The majority of the acts are broken up into Act 1 is 3D, Act 2 is 2D. And the 2D levels, kind of like classic Sonic and Generations original, is less fun. I kind of wish that the Sonic series didn't feel like it has to compartmentalize all of these levels. Like, this is the 3D part, this is the 2D part. I really don't think that those 2D sections couldn't be 3D. Not that the 2D levels aren't good, but they're just not even close to the 3D levels. I just want to play those 3D levels more. I'd gladly trade 5 2D levels for like 1 or 2 more 3D ones, because those 3D ones are really good. Speaking of levels, let's talk about that a bit. They've done a really good job with making the 3D levels work with the Frontiers moveset. Each level is based on a game that Shadow has been in, except for Frontiers. There's a Frontiers level, probably just to reuse assets. The best level by far is Kingdom Valley Act 1, I think. It's the most focused, it's the most open-ended, and it has a lot of good shortcuts that are very reminiscent of my favorite things from the adventure games. There's this one skip that I did where you can jump off of a rail early, and instead of go all the way down this tower, you can just go straight to this one ring, and they leave that ring for you so that you can get it and skip to the next part. Shout out, Sonic team, you did it, you made it work. But the thing is that level, Kingdom Valley, is so good because it has no automation. But then there's a problem, is there's quite a bit of automation in some of the other levels, especially when Doom shows up. So when the Doom Eye shows up and he transports you to other stuff like Doctor Strange style, it's cool the first time, but every subsequent playthrough it is worse. It's more boring, it's more extra, and it kind of just takes up time. You can do some small shortcuts in these segments, but they're very limited. They're very like two-dimensional shortcuts. It'll be like jump to this rail to skip ahead, or jump on this bumper to skip ahead. It doesn't really, it's like a fast forward button. It's not like actually feeling like you're doing anything, which is pretty disappointing because it makes it harder for me to want to replay Space Colony Arc or Rail Canyon, for example. Rail Canyon is really fun, and it probably also has a few skips that I haven't found, but it just has that dumb Devil Doom segment, and I just don't want to do it. Like, it's not ruining my life or anything, but it's just kind of boring and takes away from the identity of the level. You end up getting spit into Radical Highway, and it's like, why am I even here? Like, speaking of which, though, Radical Highway, the level in the end of the game, is really good. I really enjoyed the last 2 levels because they feel like real genuine challenges that give you a lot of things to consider. Like, there's a lot of alternate routes again. Really good stuff with that one. Originally in Frontiers, a lot of those 3D levels were just way too short, and they took that really to heart here because these levels feel like 4 levels stitched together. It's kind of like in Sonic Adventure 1, where you have a different section of a level that adds up to be one 3 or 4 minute level. Still though, some of the best 3D levels we've seen in a long time, and easily on par with the original Generations. Overall, I think Shadow Generations did a really great job with the gameplay, but there is one other thing, there's the overworld. The overworld for me, I don't really care for it. I don't love collecting bolts. I don't really like the purple challenges. Those purple challenges, especially the ones with the clock, feel like needlessly hard. There's no route that it shows you, so you have to just sort of figure it out. And I was doing this one timer clock one where I was following it around, and then it was like in the ground, and I just like forgot where to go. I just like gave up. I was like, forget it. I'm not I did not like those timer challenges. They're kind of a mess in my opinion. The ring challenges are a lot easier because you can clearly see where the rings are. But yeah, those timer challenges were so just overly complicated in my opinion. Don't know what collecting the bolts do? I'm the wrong guy if you want to know completion stuff. Oh, and the bosses. The bosses are actually really good. I think there might be 4 bosses for 5 levels. So there's BioLizard Metal Madness. Oh no, that's the level. Metal Overlord, Mephiles, and Devil Doom, which are all very good. Probably my favorite was Metal Overlord. The boss felt very cinematic, but also really like a good test of your ability to use the surf, which is cool to see. BioLizard, I like that one too. In general though, all 4 of the bosses, I might be forgetting a boss, but all 4 of the ones I mentioned are really good, A lot of fun. And I really like the post-game challenges, where the bosses, a lot of them will have no rings for the challenge, which is really cool. Reminds me a lot of like Mario Galaxy, where you'd have like the one-hit boss.
There is no future for you. Ever.
So next up, let's talk about the plot. The entirety of Shadow Generations, of course, takes place during the original Sonic Generations, but carries a lot more weight since it's Shadow as the lead. Shadow, at least in the older games, had a lot more of a complex narrative, and he was probably the only real Sonic character with like a real good story, and which is well represented here, which is really surprising. It was really cool to see characters return like Maria and Gerald Robotnik, because really like those characters are so out of place nowadays. At the time, it felt a lot more okay for those things to exist, but now it's kind of nuts that they still kept those original plot lines with like a crazy scientist trying to ruin the world, and like Maria having like some form of Sonic the Hedgehog diseases. Like it's like really dark stuff when you think about it too much, which is really entertaining to me. But it does sort of bring in a larger sort of discussion about where Sonic is nowadays and like why they're able to do this again. Sonic Generations came from such a different time where it felt like Sega was afraid of being criticized by Genesis fans, who would look at what modern Sonic was doing and just consider it like cringy and embarrassing and like over the top. Whereas Shadow Generations now, you know, some 15 years later, is embracing the fans that grew up with the Shadow games, which would be like Sonic Adventure through to Sonic 06. And it feels like it's like this turning point where we've moved past the Genesis nostalgia and really started to embrace the adventure nostalgia cycle. Being in my late 20s, I'm all for it, but you know, what can you do? There's like this old meme of like the Sonic cycle where every game launch led to like hype and then horrible disappointment because like a bunch of cartoon characters showed up that weren't Sonic. I think it's safe to say that that's just kind of nonsense that people that had already grown out of the series were saying. But I think that the Sonic cycle now is sort of this long-term thing. There's sort of like this new modern Sonic cycle where you can map out the direction the series has been going for the last 20 years. Starting from about Generations time, there is this big nostalgia wave for Genesis stuff. And we got like Green Hill returning and Classic Sonic returning. And they really milked that dry up until Forces kind of forced them to stop, because Classic Sonic was embarrassingly added in for no reason. So it was kind of like the engine that was driving Genesis nostalgia has like slowly run out of gas, and we finally reached that point now. It seems like we're in a new nostalgia cycle. It's the adventure time. The new writers and game direction have clearly expressed their love for the era of big evil bosses and mysterious creatures and melodramatic Sonic storylines. It's cool to see that we're back to kind of having a cool Sonic instead of like an ironic Sonic. Like, for example, the way that boss fights are represented in Shadow Generations, and it started in Sonic Frontiers, like we've got these over-the-top, very highly animated, like Dragon Ball style stuff that was just kind of gone for a long time. It's cool to see again, like with the vocal tracks and that sort of thing. As a fan of those things, it's been really cool.
Now it seems that we all have to pay for my sins.
Nostalgia pandering has definitely been sort of steering the Sonic ship for years now. And a game like Sonic and Shadow Generations is a real sign that there's been a change in the winds. There's so much nostalgia bait. Like the cutscene where Shadow has to have that rival battle with Sonic from Sonic Generations. It was killing me. Like, it was killing me with nostalgia bait.
It'll be a date to die for.
Because it's so pandering. Like, the voice lines are straight from the Sonic Adventure games. Yeah, what can you do? The animated shorts they were putting out before were also really cool. Seeing Emerald, seeing all these other characters return. It's like all these characters that you'd imagine Sega had just dumped into a closet and forgot about. They finally have come back, and you can see them, and in ways that are like not ironic. Having Big the Cat show up in Shadow Generations for no reason and just be there is really great to see. he's not there to like be a dumb character. He's just doing big. He's doing big the cat stuff. Like, yeah, he is a dumb character, but he's just existing, and he's like, hey, I'm here. It's great. Yeah, I guess it's kind of a sign of like this sort of writing that focuses on callbacks too much. But again, it's fun to see. Like, Black Doom gives Shadow a villain, and Eggman is obviously not in that role because he's busy with Sonic. We haven't come that close to a dramatic ending of a Sonic game since Sonic Adventure 2, I think. It's not the best thing ever made. It's not like going to change your life, but it's so good considering we've had pretty much no stories for 10 years. You could say the same thing about Frontiers a lot, but this time it feels very real. Like, it feels like this is really what they were trying to do. So yeah, good stuff. Shout out to Sonic Team and the writers and stuff. This might feel a bit abrupt, but that's it. Generations is a bit less of a perfect Sonic game than I originally remembered, but I do still think its high points are fun. And Shadow Generations, coming out now, feels like a very good 3D Sonic game that we've been owed for so long. It's really cool to be playing as a new character again that's not Sonic and not just part of some weird bonus content. And it's really great to see them acknowledging the things that fans have been asking for forever, it feels like. Sonic Generations is a really short game, and so is Shadow Generations. So put together, you get a really solid package. It took me about 3 hours to get through Sonic Generations and about 6 to get through Shadow Generations, but I did a lot more in Shadow Generations. I didn't just go straight to the end. But yeah, I, again, recommend the games. I really feel like it's a sign that Sega and Sonic Team have really moved ahead and gotten past a bit of that Genesis nostalgia cycle that they've been trapped in. I don't think that they can ever say goodbye completely to classic Sonic, but it is a sign that, you know, maybe they're willing to give the fans of the later stuff a bit more love. But yeah, that's it for me today. This has been sort of a quick, less produced video than I'm usually doing, a lot less notes than I usually do, but I really think that it's been fun to play through these games and talk about them. I hope you enjoyed my little snapshot of an opinion piece here. The internet in my sort of YouTube feed has been absolutely flooded with stuff about this game, so I was a little unsure if I should even bother because there's so many people talking about this, but I'm glad that when this is done, I can at least go and watch those videos myself. Yeah, because I feel like trying to ignore all these opinions and stuff. If you watched all the way through here, thank you so much for coming along and watching the entire video. I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed and commented and let me know what you think about the games and the future of the nostalgia cycle of Sonic. All that stuff, though, helps other folks find this channel and, you know, it's greatly appreciated. On this channel, I tend to cover more retro stuff, so if you're into that, go and check those videos out. I'll leave them at the end card. And take care.